At the United Nations General Assembly in New York, world leaders take stock of the counter-terror fight. How technology is transforming the continent's economies. And a creative South African puts fire to paper and creates art. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, while Iran's North Korea's nuclear programs dominated headlines, countering terrorism and extremism also took center stage at the UN General Assembly last week. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and top officials from 24 countries highlighted progress made in the fight to defeat the Islamic State militant group in Iraq. Here's VOA's diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain.
It's been a hard fight, but U.S. officials say progress is being made against Islamic State militants, with more than 6 million people in Iraq and Syria no longer living in areas controlled by the terror group. Special U.S. Presidential Envoy Brett McGurk warned efforts must continue.
We need to make sure that we keep our foot on the gas and follow through.
And as Islamic State militants go into retreat, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov foresees more battles to come.
Despite the fact that ISIL is in retreat in Syria and Iraq, we need to make quite a few additional efforts in order to stabilize the region.
During a meeting with African leaders at the UNGA Wednesday, President Donald Trump pledged U.S. help in the ongoing fight against terrorist groups on that continent.
Terrorist groups such as ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and Al-Qaeda also threaten African peace. The United States is proud to work with you to eradicate terrorist safe havens, to cut off their finances, and to discredit their depraved ideology.
A spate of terrorist attacks in Europe indicates the threat is constantly taking on new forms. European Union President Donald Tusk.
2017 showed us that Daesh, as a territorial entity, is fated for defeat. That's good news. Sadly, however, repeated terrorist attacks, also in Europe, demonstrate that the threat continues.
Asia is also no stranger to the scourge of terrorism.
Having been a target of a number of terrorist attacks myself, I personally empathize with the victims of terrorism and appreciate their need for protection.
For too long, the conflict in Afghanistan has been viewed as a civil war, said Afghan President Ashraf Ghani.
But this war is not within our soil. It is over our soil. Today, there are over 20 international terrorist groups with an imposed presence on Afghan soil. The future of Afghanistan matters because we are on the front line of the global effort to eradicate the threat of terrorism.
China and Russia's foreign ministers stressed world leaders need to fight terrorism together without using what they referred to as double standards or associating terrorism with one particular ethnic group or religion. Cindy Sain, VOA News, the State Department.
Well, now for more on the UN General Assembly, VOA's Margaret Bashir joins me live from the United Nations. Margaret, besides the threat of terrorism, it looks like we should be worried about even a bigger threat for the entire globe.
Yes, some breaking news out of New York this morning. A little over an hour ago, the North Korean foreign minister spoke to us reporters here. He was leaving for the airport, heading back to Pyongyang, and he stopped at the microphones to tell us that a tweet that President Trump wrote on Saturday night is now being considered as a declaration of war by Pyongyang. So a serious escalation in the tensions between the U.S. and North Korea. Ri Yong-ho said that because it came from the person who occupies the White House in the United States, this is clearly a declaration of war, he said, and the world should remember that it was the United States that declared war first on North Korea. And he said because they read this as a declaration of war, they would take countermeasures, he said, including reserving the right of self-defense to shoot down U.S. strategic bombers not within North Korean airspace. So the U.S. Is flying some strategic bombing missions in the Northeast Asia area as a deterrent to North Korea, and he is basically making threats against those flights. The tweet he was referring to came from President Trump late on Saturday night after he had heard or read the statement by Mr. Ri, the foreign minister, and he said, "I just heard Foreign Minister of North Korea speak at UN. If he echoes thoughts of Little Rocket Man, they won't be around much longer." So as you may know, Little Rocket Man is President Trump's new nickname for Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea.
Now,
so they are seeing that as a threat against their leadership in their country.
Now, very quickly, this seems to be going beyond grandstanding or posturing. Has there been reaction from particularly the neighbors of North Korea?
Well, not to these particular comments. It's just been about an hour since he made them. But UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said last week that it's very important the two sides do not escalate the rhetoric because there could be what he called a fatal misunderstanding. And I think we're sort of in that territory now where the rhetoric has really escalated to a new level if North Korea is saying they're reading this as a declaration of war.
Wow, really, really dangerous situation there, Margaret. Thank you very much for giving us that update on the news. Well, Margaret Bashir is reporting from the United Nations. Now, for all of your UN General Assembly news, be sure to follow Margaret on Twitter at @mbashir. Now, 3 United Nations peacekeepers from Bangladesh were killed on Sunday by an explosive device that detonated as they were escorting a convoy in northern Mali. That's according to West African countries' peacekeeping mission and the Bangladeshi military. Now, 5 other UN troops were seriously wounded in that explosion, which occurred at around 7 a.m. local time on the main road between the towns of Anafis and Gao. The head of mission, Cohen Davidson, said, quote, "The mission will use all means to ensure that justice is rendered." Well, now, it's been more than 3 years since the Bring Back Our Girls campaign first captured the world's attention. In April 2014, Boko Haram abducted 276 schoolgirls in Nigeria's Borno state. Some have escaped, and the Nigerian government has helped secure the release of 100 girls, but more than 100 remain missing. Activists and lawmakers gathered here in Washington, D.C. on Friday, calling for greater efforts to find them. Africa 54's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick reports.
The gathering was a reminder to America and the world that there is unfinished business in Africa. The 113 schoolgirls still held by the terrorist group Boko Haram. The Chibok girls have a tireless champion on Capitol Hill, a Florida congresswoman pushing lawmakers to help finish the job.
I have passed resolutions. I have legislation that I still have to pass. But I will continue to fight and bully everybody I can to make them pass it. Because these are children who didn't deserve this. And they are strong young girls. I have met them. And it is phenomenal, the strength and the power these girls emit.
The screening of a short film, Waiting for Hassana, a survivor's harrowing account of the night Boko Haram raided school dormitories and loaded girls onto trucks in the town of Chibok. Filmmaker Ifunanya Maduka hopes to keep their story in the world's collective memory.
Perhaps the most pointed remarks came from Nigeria's former Minister of Education, who said there has been too much focus on the story behind the girls' abduction and not enough on their safety. As she put it, the world's shared humanity was on trial and the world failed.
Don't let this be an episodic event. How does the world keep up with the hypocrisy of asking girls and women to go to school when the ones that went to school, 113 of them, are still in the grips of those that took them away from the schoolroom? It is so unjust.
Nigerians in the diaspora ask about progress in the investigation and whether authorities in Abuja and Washington are doing enough. Gregory Simpkins from the House Subcommittee on Africa believes a strong counter-terrorism partnership between Nigeria and the U.S. could be instrumental to finding the missing girls and bringing Boko Haram to justice.
We are trying to work with the government, the Defense Ministry, on military cooperation, where we're now training counterterrorism units in Nigeria to fight Boko Haram. But we want to make sure that human rights are observed. It's been a problem. And so they're supposed to send a delegation here in the next few weeks. They're very interested in coming to talk to our Congress, and I think that will be very useful.
Activists and lawmakers here resolving to keep the drumbeat alive until every Chibok girl is rescued and brought home. Hayley Adams Fitzpatrick, VOA News, Washington.
Now, some of the Nigerian girls who were released after being abducted from the town of Chibok in 2014 by the extremist group Boko Haram are returning to school after years of recovery. VOA's Salim Solomon reports.
More than 100 Chibok girls released by Boko Haram militants have begun a new phase of their lives, taking classes at the American University of Nigeria after months of rest and recovery under the care of the Nigerian government. Nigeria's Minister of Women's Affairs and Social Development, Aisha Jumai Al-Hassan, says the girls had to go through a recovery program first.
We cannot bring back the 3 years. Okay, we cannot bring back the 3 years, but we'll make sure, by the grace of God, that they make up for what they have lost. And that is why we have all these programs that we have here. Apart from the number one thing is to keep them, to stabilize them medically and psychologically.
Al-Hassan said the girls will start remedial classes at AUN to prepare them for undergraduate studies in any field of their choice to be paid for by the federal government. AUN was already educating 24 girls who escaped Boko Haram shortly after the Islamist radical group kidnapped more than 250 students from a secondary school in the Borno state town of Chibok in April 2014. The abductions sparked worldwide outrage and a Bring Back Our Girls movement that gained supporters in the United States, including then First Lady Michelle Obama. The girls who entered the university this week spent 30 to 37 months in Boko Haram captivity before the militants released them following negotiations with the Nigerian government. U.S. Representative Frederica Wilson, Democrat of Florida, an early supporter of Bring Back Our Girls, met the girls in Abuja shortly before they left the city. She told VOA the former captives generally seemed to be in good shape, but this was after a long period of medical treatment and psychological therapy.
Can you imagine being held captive with terrorists, men who frighten you every single day for 3 years? When you are released, you are not normal. Your psychic is not too good. So they had to debrief them and help them.
Wilson endorsed the government's decision to keep the girls together in rehab instead of returning them to their homes.
Because these girls had been together so long, to separate them would have traumatized them, in my estimation. I think the decision they made to keep them together was the best thing they could have done.
More than 100 girls from Chibok remain in Boko Haram captivity 3.5 years after they were taken. Salim Solomon for Grace Abdu, VOA News.
Well, travelers to the United States from 8 countries are facing new restrictions and a revised travel ban order signed by President Donald Trump on Sunday. The new rules, which take effect on October the 18th, affect citizens of Somalia, Chad, Libya, Iran, North Korea, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. Officials say these countries are refusing to share information about terrorism and other issues with the United States. The announcement came as Trump's previous temporary ban on visitors from 6 Muslim-majority countries was expiring 90 days after it went into effect. Trump last week called for a tougher travel ban after a bomb partially exploded on a London subway. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We also are streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends also. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, coming up, harnessing the power of technology to uplift the continent's economies. Stay with us.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is national security.
Well, across Africa, huge infrastructural projects are transforming the continent's landscape and fueling record economic growth. However, many wonder what specific sectors should be prioritized to propel Africa into greater prosperity. Joining me to discuss the issue is Dr. Thomas Mensah. He's a Ghanaian-American chemical engineer and inventor. Now, he's an expert in the development of fiber optics and nanotechnology. In fact, some of his inventions are in use inside our studios right now. Dr. Mensah, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks, Vincent.
Now, I mentioned that some of your inventions are in use. Can you just briefly explain why I said that?
Well, social media is a big thing.
Yeah.
And as you know, in the 80s, I'm one of the 4 inventors of fiber optics.
Yeah.
And this allowed the internet to explode because now you have fiber optics being used as undersea cable connecting Africa, China, Japan, everywhere.
Exactly.
So you can call Japan, you can send Facebook pictures to Japan, to China, all over the world because of that technology.
Because of that, and moves fast, and most of it you've explained in your book. The right stuff comes in black too.
Yes.
And this is the right stuff. Eh?
Yes.
And the brains behind it.
Yeah.
Great.
This is the 2nd edition, and so that's your copy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So we'll hopefully read a lot more about you. But let's talk about how technology can be applied, especially in the sector of transportation in Africa, in order to help the continent grow even faster and get even more prosperous.
Yeah, we are proposing that African countries kind of leapfrog by implementing serious strategic infrastructure projects. For example, high-speed train. What you see here basically is a proposal to the Ghana government. And actually, I had a meeting with the president of Ghana last Friday on this. The idea is to have a bullet train, high-speed train, going from the south, which is Accra, the main capital, and Takoradi, through Kumasi, all the way to the border, to Tamale.
Yeah.
And what this does is that instead of taking 4 days to go from the south to the north by trucks or by train, whatever, you can take 1.5 hours.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, you can even live in Tamale and work here.
Yeah. So you get the sense that, you know, if across the continent, we could have these speed trains, this really fast-moving trains, like they have now built. I think in Kenya they have one now from the port of Mombasa to inland.
Yes.
That on its own can play a big role in creating wealth and helping the countries to grow.
Yeah, this is very, very important.
Yeah.
Currently, you have Morocco has one.
Yeah.
Ethiopia has one, and as you mentioned, Kenya. Now, in West Africa, this will be the first.
In Ghana, it will be the first. Yeah.
And this will be very important because another proposal we have is that you're going to put fiber optics cable along the train route.
Yes.
And as you go up, you can actually branch off into the different rural areas with this fiber. So internet will be everywhere.
So
but most importantly, Vincent, you're going to have these trains traveling at 200 miles per hour. And with a fiber optic cable, using the Wi-Fi in the train, you can connect to the internet.
So you're saying, in fact, that there will be like a double or triple benefit in terms of advancement and spread of technology across the country.
Exactly. Yeah. With this single project, what it will do is you can create factories along the train route that will supply to the train. So if you look at this, China has about 40 trains. When I first proposed this, you know, in America, you know, America is building, you know, from California now, 2 in California. They have built 40. in 10 years. That means they build 4 every year, which means China, for example, can build this train in less than 3 years. And what it will do is that it will create jobs that's needed. You know, you can train people from high schools to be mechanics, from colleges, universities, to be part of this infrastructure development, to be a strategic infrastructure, which means even if you manufacture anything in the factories, you just put it on a high-speed rail, and already it's in the port to go all over the world. So this is transformational for any country that develops the technology. And as you know, all the experts in the diaspora, myself, everybody will be eager to go back to their countries. Just like folks trained, Indians that were trained here, Chinese that were trained here, went back home and have their country developed. This high-speed train is built. All of us will be advisors, will be back helping the country implement this. And then the maintenance of this train, the maintenance and operation alone would really create, in some places, about 1 million jobs.
We hope those leaders are listening to great brains like you, so that, in fact, they can not only help the countries, but also connect with the rest of the world. Thank you very much for sharing this with us, and congratulations for your work.
Thank you.
Well, that's Thomas Mensah, who is a Ghanaian American chemical engineer and inventor. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Where there is smoke, there is art. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines.
Sudan is one of the 6 majority Muslim countries removed from President Trump's original travel ban. In South Africa, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma holds her first campaign rally in Harding for the presidency of the African National Congress after being reappointed to parliament. In Nigeria, thousands of people displaced from their homes by Boko Haram protest over food shortages and poor conditions in their camps. Finally, in South Sudan, First Vice President Tabang Dengai reaffirms that his country is cooperating with the United Nations mission and facilitating the deployment of regional protection forces.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Now, getting through customs at Los Angeles International Airport may have just gotten easier. You can thank a new app for taking away the lines. Mobile Pass or Mobile Passport Control could change the way Americans and Canadians travel internationally. Setup is completed in 4 easy steps after you download the free app on your iPhone or Android. Set up your profile, input your travel information, get a receipt or QR code and scan here and go. And for safety reasons, passport information can be deleted after every trip. Well, next up, ever since South African artist Anathi Kanyuza discovered he could play with fire to create art, it has become his favorite medium. When he came across fumage, a technique made popular by Australian artist Wolfgang Paulin in the late 1930s, he says he knew it was the challenge he needed. This art medium creates impressions using the smoke of a candle on paper or canvas. Currently, Nkanyuza is working on a series of portraits. One is of South African anti-apartheid activist Stephen Biko. Nkanyuza still struggles with nerves when working in front of an audience, something he often does to showcase this rare technique, playing with fire. Now, hundreds of people attended the just completed annual Washington, D.C. Fashion Week. Now, the theme was Power of Style. Viewers Anastasia Tudische attended the show and is here to tell us all about it. Anastasia.
Hi, Vincent.
Hi. I thought I saw you actually on the, on the catwalk. You didn't participate, you just observed.
No, that's sweet.
Right.
I'm never leaving this show.
So how was it? At first I got a little confused. How many shows are there in a year?
So there are two shows, two DC Fashion Week a year, per year. One in September, one in February. And it's been, the just completed one has been the 13th one.
Ah, okay.
And yes, it was very interesting. Lots of energy, a type of energy that you don't typically see in DC, that is more a poised, quiet city. So there was frenzy and
So what kind of fashion are we seeing here? Is it all just, you know, is it a free kind of mix of fashions?
This typical show is the Cordier International Show. The stylist behind that happens to be the organizer of the DC Fashion Week, Ian Williams. He is so passionate about fashion, and he thinks fashion is more than just frivolity. It's a way to express yourself, to make people get together, and that's exactly what he showed. You can see very, you know, slim models, but it's very inclusive as well. He also hired plus-size models, and they were the most applauded, which I understand.
Because everybody's okay, everybody's important.
Yes, absolutely. That's his way.
I see images there, quite impressive. Some even look very African, almost in their cut. But you are a fashionista, I know. Were you impressed? Is there stuff there you say, this is something I can buy?
Oh, definitely, yes, of course. I would say that this was very classical, reminded me of the first Saint Laurent, the Oscar de la Renta, you know, very feminine and sexy and owning who they are type of figures. And I really liked it. But it was not, you know, I didn't see something that was so stunning that I had never seen before. You know, I come from Paris. I'm Congolese. It takes a lot to impress us.
Congolese,
but
Paris, everything.
You know, but what is impressing about that is the inclusiveness.
Okay, thank you. You know, I know you can talk about this for the rest of the day.
Forever.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. Anastasia Tudische works with Voice of America's French service as a reporter. That's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to Viewers Evening Radio Show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A plate is a dish that you put your food on.
Have a lot on your plate.
Hey Anna, I'm having a party this weekend. You should come.
I wish I could, but my weekend is really busy. I'm baking a wedding cake, writing my article, teaching 2 classes, and oh, my parents are visiting.
Wow, you have a lot on